How could you sell the condo? I promised it to my wife. Hand over the sale money right now. Devin screamed those words at me with a fury I had never seen in his eyes. Tasha wept behind him, clutching her chest as if she were having a panic attack. But I just took a deep breath and said calmly, "There's a second piece of news you need to hear." As the words left my mouth, I watched my son's face transform. First, there was confusion, then fear, and finally that tremor in his hands that only appears when someone feels the rug being pulled out from under them. "But Mom," he stammered, his voice cracking, "my wife and I have nowhere to go. We can't live on the street." And right then, at that very moment, I knew I had won because for years I was the one who trembled. I was the one who begged. I was the one who lived in fear. But that woman doesn't exist anymore. My name is Clara Mae Johnson. I'm 65 years old. And until 6 months ago I was invisible. Invisible to my son, invisible to my daughter-in-law, and invisible even to myself. I lived in a 2-bedroom unit that my late husband and I bought 30 years ago. It wasn't fancy. The walls had water stains in the corners. The kitchen was small and dark, but it was mine. It was the only place in the world where I still existed as something more than a shadow. My husband, Thomas, passed away 7 years ago. He went in his sleep without pain, without a goodbye. And since that day, my life had become a silent routine. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, brewed coffee in the same old percolator that made a strange sputtering noise. I swept the floor, looked out the window, and I waited. I didn't even know what I was waiting for. Devin was my only child, my only close relative. After his father died, I thought we would get closer. I thought he'd visit more often, that he'd call to check on me, that maybe, just maybe, he'd invite me out to dinner sometimes. But no, Devin had his own life. He had Tasha. He had his job, his friends, his plans, and I was just a number on his to-do list. A quick phone call every 2 weeks, an obligatory visit on Christmas, nothing more. At first, I tried not to take it personally. I told myself it was normal, that children grow up and move on, that I couldn't be selfish. But loneliness is a heavy burden. It weighs on your chest like a stone, sinking you slowly, so gradually that you don't even notice until you can't breathe anymore. Devin's visits were always the same. He'd knock, walk in without a smile, and sit on the sofa with his phone in his hand. "Hey Mom, how you holding up?" "I'm fine, son. And you?" "Good. Busy." Then silence. That uncomfortable silence was filled only by the sounds of his cell phone notifications. I'd offer him coffee. He'd say he didn't have time. I'd ask about Tasha. He'd answer in clipped sentences. I'd try to tell him something about my day, about the neighbors, about anything, and he'd glance at his watch. He always looked at his watch as if every minute with me was a minute stolen from his real life. But I smiled. I always smiled because he was my son. And a mother doesn't give up. A mother keeps trying even when it hurts, even when she's invisible. Tasha was different. Or at least she seemed to be at first. When Devin first brought her home, she smiled a lot. She hugged me, called me Mama Clara in a sweet voice, and brought me cheap flowers from the supermarket. And I, so alone, so starved for affection, let myself be fooled. I thought I finally had someone else in my life, the daughter I never had, someone to talk to. But the flowers wilted, and with them Tasha's mask fell too. Little by little I started noticing the glances. Those quick looks she'd shoot around the apartment when she thought I wasn't watching. Glances that evaluated, that calculated, that measured the value of everything, the walls, the furniture, the space itself. And then I understood. To her I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle between her and what she wanted. The insults started subtly, so subtly that at first I thought I was imagining them. One day, Tasha arrived with Devin and said, "Mama Clara, this sofa is ancient. You really ought to replace it." I told her I didn't have the money for that. She smiled and said, "Well, when this unit is ours, the first thing we'll do is renovate everything." As if they had already decided, as if my death were just a pending formality. Another time they were having dinner at my place. I had cooked for hours. I'd made the smothered pork chops my son loved as a boy, but Tasha barely took a bite and said, "It's a little too salty, isn't it, Dev?" And my son, my own son, nodded without even looking at me. They left their plates almost full, and I, as always, said nothing. I just cleaned up in silence while they talked about their plans, their dreams, their future. A future where I didn't exist. But there was one moment that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the bathroom when I heard Devin and Tasha arrive. They hadn't told me they were coming. I heard their voices in the living room, and something in the tone made me freeze. It made me listen. "How much do you think this place is worth?" Tasha asked. "I don't know, maybe $280,000, Devin replied. "With that, we could put the down payment on a real house, a big one." Tasha's voice was filled with excitement. "But your mom won't sell, will she, Devin?" He laughed a dry, chilling laugh. "Nah, but she's not going to live forever. And when she goes, this place is mine. It's all the inheritance I've got." Tasha sighed, relieved. "Thank goodness, because honestly, I don't know how much longer I can pretend to like her." I felt something shatter inside me. Something that could never be repaired. I stayed in the bathroom, my hand over my mouth to keep silent. The tears fell freely, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was something deeper. It was the death of an illusion. The illusion that my son loved me, that I mattered to him even a little. When I finally came out, they were sitting on the sofa. Tasha smiled at me. "Mama Clara, what a surprise. We didn't know you were home." A lie. They knew perfectly well. They just didn't care. Devin didn't even look up. He was checking his phone. And I smiled again. I offered them coffee. They declined. They stayed for 10 more minutes and left. I sat down on that old sofa they despised so much and asked myself, when did I become this, someone waiting for her own death just to stop being a bother? The hours passed slowly after they left. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the city noises, the passing cars, the distant voices, the wind hitting the window. And at some point between the darkness and the silence, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to keep waiting. I wasn't going to keep being invisible. I wasn't going to hand over my life to someone who was only waiting for me to die. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something close to rage, but it wasn't explosive rage. It was cold, calculated. It was the anger of someone who was finally waking up. The next morning, I woke up different. I don't know how to explain it. It was as if something inside me had hardened overnight. As if all the tears I'd shed had washed away something old and rotten, leaving space for something new, something stronger. I got up, made my coffee, but this time I didn't sit staring out the window like always. This time I took out an old notebook I had stored in a drawer and started writing. I wrote down everything I remembered. Every insult, every hurtful word, every contemptuous look. I needed to see it. I needed to understand how blind I had been. And when I finished, I had filled 5 pages of proof that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't crazy, that they had genuinely reduced me to nothing. The humiliations didn't stop. They actually worsened. It was as if Devin and Tasha sensed I was changing and needed to remind me of my place. 2 weeks after the conversation I overheard, they came to visit again. This time they brought news. "Mom," Devin said without even a greeting, "we need to talk about something important. Tasha and I are house hunting. We want to start a family, but everything is so expensive." I nodded. I said nothing. I just waited. Then Tasha spoke with that falsely sweet voice I hated so much. "Mama Clara, we know this unit is huge for just you. 2 bedrooms for 1 person. It's a waste, don't you think? You could live somewhere smaller, cozier, and maybe you could sell us this place at a fair price. Of course, a family price. A family price." The words sounded nice, but I knew what they meant. They meant they wanted me to give away my only asset, to hand over the home my husband and I had paid for with 30 years of hard work, just so they could start their lives without making sacrifices, without working hard like we did. I took a deep breath and told them, "I'm not ready to sell. This place holds too many memories for me." Devin frowned. "Mom, don't be selfish. You won't need it for much longer anyway. At your age, what's the point of clinging to material things? You should be thinking about your son, about your family." Tasha nodded, fake tears welling in her eyes. But we were really counting on this, Mama Clara. We'd already made plans. Plans? They had made plans with my life, with my home, without even asking me. And the worst part was they said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if I owed them my existence. I stayed silent. I didn't argue. I just told them I'd think about it. And they left satisfied, certain that sooner or later I would cave, because I always caved. I always ended up giving them what they wanted. But this time something was different. This time, as I closed the door behind them, I didn't feel guilt. I felt determination. I felt clarity. And I knew exactly what I had to do. 3 more weeks passed, 3 weeks where Devin called me every day, not to ask how I was, not to see if I needed anything, but just to pressure me. Mom, have you thought about what we talked about? Mom, we found a perfect house, but we need the down payment money. Mom, don't be difficult. And Tasha would send texts, long messages filled with sad face emojis. Mama Clara, I know it's hard for you, but think about the grandkids you could have. Don't you want your future grandchildren to have a good home? Every message was a blow. Every call was a reminder that, to them, I was only a means to an end. And the rage kept growing, cold, silent, powerful. Then came the moment that changed everything for good. It was a Friday. I had gone to the bank for a simple task, updating my information, nothing major. But while I was waiting, I overheard 2 women talking. One younger was telling the other, my mother-in-law finally sold her house. She bought a small condo, and with the rest she went traveling. She says she worked for others her whole life, and now she wants to live for herself. The other woman laughed. How brave. I wouldn't have the nerve to do that. My family would kill me. And the first one replied, but it's her money, her life. Why should she need to ask permission? Those words stuck with me. Why should I need to ask permission? It was my condo, my life, my decision. No one had given it to me. No one had paid a single dollar of the mortgage except my husband and me. And yet, I had spent months feeling like I didn't have the right to do what I wanted with what was mine, that somehow I owed everything to Devin just for being my son. That wasn't love. That was manipulation. And I had allowed myself to be manipulated for too long. I left the bank with a clear idea, so clear that my own boldness startled me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. It was now or never. That same afternoon, I searched online for real estate agencies. I found one with good reviews and called. A kind voice answered, "Good morning. How can we help you?" And I, my voice only trembling slightly, said, "I want to sell my condo fast." No big advertising, no letting too many people know. The woman on the other end asked a few questions: address, size, condition. Then she said, "We can send someone out tomorrow to do an appraisal." "Perfect," I replied and hung up. I sat on the sofa with the phone in my hand, feeling my heart pound. I had just taken the first step and there was no turning back. The next day, the agent came, a man in his 40s with a gray suit and a professional smile. He toured the apartment, took pictures, made notes, and finally told me, "Mrs. Johnson, this place could sell for around $280,000, maybe a little more if we do some minor repairs, but if you want to sell fast like you said, we could get $250,000 in less than a month." I nodded. "Let's do it." He looked surprised. "You don't want to consult with your family first?" "Most people." I cut him off. "I don't need to consult with anyone. It's my decision." He smiled, handed me the papers to sign, and a week later, there was an interested buyer. A young couple who needed to move quickly for a job. They offered $270,000 cash, no financing, no complications. I accepted immediately. During all this time, I said nothing to Devin. He kept calling, kept pressuring. "Mom, have you decided? We need an answer. Tasha is getting anxious." And I answered with evasions. "I'm still thinking, son. Give me a little more time." He would grunt in frustration, but he didn't push too hard because he was sure I'd eventually cave, just like always. But while he waited confidently, I was signing papers, closing the sale, receiving the money in my bank account, and looking for a new place for myself. A smaller 1-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood. It cost $175,000. I bought it outright. No mortgage, no debt. And the rest of the money, over $100,000, I put into an investment account the bank recommended. The move was quick. I hired a small company. I packed only the essentials. Clothes, some books, photos of my husband, the memories that truly mattered. I sold or gave away the rest. I didn't need much. I never had. And 3 weeks after making the decision, I was already living in my new condo. It was small, yes, but it had natural light, a functional kitchen, a clean bathroom, and most importantly, it was entirely mine. No one had a key. No one had set foot in that place before me. It was my space, my new beginning. And for the first time in years I felt at peace. But I knew the storm was coming. Devin still didn't know anything, and when he found out, all hell would break loose. So I prepared myself. I put all the sale documents in a binder. I printed bank statements showing where the money was. And most importantly, I had secretly recorded the last conversations with Devin and Tasha, the ones where they talked about the condo as if it were already theirs, where they planned what they'd do with it when I died, where Tasha complained about having to fake liking me. I had all the evidence and I was ready. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was arranging the last books on the shelf of my new condo when the phone rang. It was Devin. His voice sounded strangely cheerful. Mom? Hey, good thing you answered. Tasha and I want to take you out to dinner this Friday. Haven't spent time together in a while. I paused. Devin never invited me out to dinner, never. Sure, son. What time? 7. We'll pick you up. And don't worry about a thing. Our treat. I hung up and knew exactly what was happening. They had decided to change strategies. Direct pressure hadn't worked. Now came the soft manipulation, the fake gestures of affection, the forced kindness. But I was no longer the same naive woman as before. This time I knew exactly what to expect. Friday arrived and I dressed carefully. I put on a chocolate brown dress I bought years ago but rarely wore. I combed my hair, put on a little makeup. I wanted to look strong. Devin arrived right on time. He rang the bell at the old condo, the one that wasn't mine anymore. I waited a few seconds before going down. When I left the building, I saw him standing next to his car, frowning and looking at his phone. Mom, he shouted when he saw me. What took you so long? I was about to come up. I had to get ready, I replied calmly. We got in the car. Tasha was in the passenger seat. She turned to me with a huge smile. Mama Clara, so good to see you. You look so sharp. Her words were honey, but her eyes were ice. We went to an Italian restaurant. It wasn't luxurious, but it wasn't cheap either. Devin chose a corner table away from the noise, away from other people. A perfect spot for a private conversation. We ordered food, pasta for Tasha, steak for Devin. I ordered a simple salad. I wasn't hungry. My stomach was tied in a knot, not from fear but from anticipation. For the first few minutes they talked about trivial things. Devin's work, a friend of Tasha's who got married, the weather. I just listened, nodded and smiled when necessary. And I waited because I knew the real reason for the dinner would come at any moment. It arrived just as the main courses were served. Devin wiped his mouth with his napkin and looked straight at me. Mom, we need to talk about something serious. Tasha and I have been thinking a lot, and we're worried about you. I looked up. Worried about me? Yes, Tasha said, leaning forward. You're all alone in that big condo. At your age, anything could happen. A fall, a health issue, and there'd be no one there to help you. Devin nodded. That's why we thought it would be better if you either moved in with us, or if you sell the condo and buy something smaller, safer, closer to us. Ah, I said simply, and they waited. They waited for me to respond with gratitude, with relief, with that submission I had always shown. But I just took a sip of water and said, It's very considerate of you to worry about me. I'll think about it. Tasha blinked, confused. But we need an answer soon, Mama Clara. Devin and I already found a house. We just need the down payment money, and we thought if you sell your condo you could give us a portion of it like a loan, or maybe an advance on the inheritance. Her words were so blatant they almost made me laugh. An advance on the inheritance, as if my death were an event scheduled on their calendar, as if I were just taking up space until they could cash in. I'll think about it, I repeated with the same calm. This time Devin tensed up. Mom, we've been talking about this for months. You can't keep stalling us. I felt the anger bubbling in my chest, but I didn't let it out. Not yet. Instead I smiled. Son, it's a big decision. I can't make it that fast. Give me a little more time. Tasha let out a dramatic sigh. But Mama Clara, we were really counting on that money. We already told the owner we want the house. If we don't put down the deposit soon, we'll lose it. There's no other option. Your condo is our only plan. How convenient, I thought. Their only plan was my sacrifice. We finished dinner in uncomfortable silence. Devin paid the bill with a look of annoyance, and when they dropped me off at my building, Tasha gave me a cold hug. Think hard, Mama Clara. We don't want to pressure you. We just want the best for everyone. The following days were an avalanche of messages. Tasha sent me photos of the house they wanted to buy. Look, Mama Clara, it has 3 bedrooms, a yard, a garage. It would be perfect for when we have kids. Your grandkids could play here. Every message was a lure. Every photo a manipulation. They were trying to get me to imagine a future that would never exist because I knew the truth. I knew that if I gave them the money, I would never see it again. I knew the grandchildren were just a fantasy to soften me up. I knew that once I had served my purpose, they would discard me, just like they always had, and I wasn't going to allow it. No. This time Devin called too, but his calls were different, less sweet, more demanding. Mom, I need an answer. Yes or no? It's simple. It's not simple, son. It's my life. It's my savings. But I'm your son, your only family. You shouldn't have to support me my whole life just for being your son. There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, dangerous silence. So, are you saying you won't help us? I'm saying I need time to think. Devin hung up without saying goodbye, and I stared at the phone, feeling the last thread of love I had for him snap for good, because a son who loves you doesn't pressure you like that. A son who loves you doesn't make you feel guilty for wanting to live your own life. A week later, Tasha showed up at my building unannounced. She rang the bell insistently. Mama Clara, open up please. We need to talk. I was about to leave for my new condo. I had left a few things I needed to pick up. I opened the door cautiously. Tasha's eyes were red. She looked like she'd been crying. Can I come in? We sat in the empty living room. Most of the furniture was gone. She looked around confused but didn't say anything. Mama Clara, she began, her voice trembling. I came to apologize. I know we've been really pushy. I know we pressured you, but we're desperate. Devin and I have been saving for years, and it's never enough. Everything is so expensive. And how could you sell the condo? I promised it to my wife. Hand over the sale money right now. Devin's voice was a raw scream, filled with a rage I'd never witnessed in his eyes before. Standing behind him, Tasha was a picture of distress, weeping and clutching at her chest as if she were on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. I simply took a slow, steadying breath and replied, in as calm a tone as I could muster. There's something else you need to know. As those words left my mouth, I watched the play of emotions across my son's face. First came a flicker of confusion, then a wave of raw fear, followed by that telltale tremor in his hands, the one that only surfaced when he felt the very ground shifting beneath his feet. But Mom, he stammered, his voice cracking with the strain. My wife and I, we have nowhere else to go. We can't just live on the street. And right there, at that precise moment, I knew I had finally turned a corner, because for so many years I had been the one trembling, the one begging, the one consumed by fear. But that woman, the one defined by fear, no longer exists. My name is Clara Mae Johnson. I'm 65 years old. And until just 6 months ago, I was invisible. I was invisible to my son, completely invisible to my daughter-in-law, and perhaps most tragically, invisible even to myself. I had been living in a 2-bedroom unit, the one my late husband and I had purchased together some 30 years ago. It wasn't a luxurious place by any stretch of the imagination. The walls were stained with old watermarks in the corners, and the kitchen was cramped and poorly lit. But it was mine. It was the only space in the world where I felt like I was something more than just a shadow, a ghost drifting through life. My husband, Thomas, had passed away 7 years prior. He went peacefully in his sleep without any pain, without even a chance to say goodbye. And ever since that devastating day, my life had slowly devolved into a silent, predictable routine. I would wake up at 6 o'clock every morning without fail, and brew myself a pot of coffee in the same old percolator, the one that always made that strange, sputtering noise as it brewed. I would sweep the kitchen floor, gaze out the window and simply wait. Though if you had asked me, I couldn't have told you what I was waiting for. Devin was my only child, my only remaining close relative. After his father passed away, I foolishly thought we would grow closer, that he would start visiting more often. I imagined he might call just to check in on me, maybe even invite me out to dinner from time to time. But that was just a naive fantasy. Devin, of course, had his own life to lead. He had Tasha, his demanding job, his circle of friends, his carefully laid plans, and I quickly realized that I was little more than a checkbox on his never-ending to-do list. A quick phone call every 2 weeks, an obligatory visit on Christmas Day, and absolutely nothing more. At first, I tried my best not to take it to heart. I constantly reminded myself that this was perfectly normal, that children grow up and inevitably move on with their own lives. I told myself that it would be selfish of me to expect anything more. But the truth is, loneliness is an incredibly heavy burden to bear. It settles on your chest like a massive stone, slowly sinking you deeper and deeper into despair, so gradually that you don't even realize how suffocated you've become until you suddenly find yourself unable to breathe. Devin's visits were depressingly predictable. He would knock politely, let himself in without so much as a smile, and immediately take a seat on the sofa, his eyes glued to his smartphone. "Hey Mom, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, son. And you?" "Good. Busy." And then silence. That uncomfortable silence would be broken only by the incessant pinging and buzzing of his cell phone notifications. I would offer him a cup of coffee, but he would always claim that he didn't have the time. I would politely ask about Tasha, and he would respond with short, clipped sentences. I would then attempt to tell him something about my day, maybe about the neighbors or some mundane event, but he would invariably glance pointedly at his watch. It always felt as if every minute he spent with me was a minute stolen from his real life. But I smiled anyway. I always smiled because he was my son, and a mother never truly gives up on her child. A mother keeps trying, even when it hurts, even when she feels utterly invisible. Tasha was different, at least that's how it seemed at first. When Devin first brought her home to meet me, she smiled a lot, offered warm hugs, called me Mama Clara, in the sweetest voice imaginable, and even brought me inexpensive flowers from the local supermarket. And I, so desperately alone and starved for any kind of affection, allowed myself to be completely taken in by her act. I dared to hope that I finally had someone else in my life, the daughter I never had, someone I could talk to and share my thoughts with. But just like the cheap flowers, Tasha's charming mask eventually began to wilt. Little by little, I started noticing the furtive glances, those quick, assessing looks she would dart around the apartment when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Glances that seemed to be calculating, evaluating, measuring the precise value of everything around her. The walls, the worn furniture, the square footage of the space itself. And then it finally dawned on me. To her, I wasn't a person, a human being with feelings and memories. I was simply an obstacle standing between her and what she truly wanted. The little insults started subtly, so subtly at first that I even began to wonder if I was just imagining them. One day, Tasha and Devin arrived together and she casually remarked, "Mama Clara, this old sofa is just ancient. You really should think about replacing it." I told her that I simply didn't have the money for something like that. She smiled sweetly and replied, "Well, when this unit is finally ours, the very first thing we're going to do is completely renovate everything." As if the decision had already been made, as if my own demise were merely a pending formality. On another occasion, they were having dinner at my place. I had spent hours in the kitchen preparing the meal, carefully making the smothered pork chops that my son had absolutely adored as a boy. But Tasha barely took a single bite before declaring, "It's just a little too salty, isn't it, Dev?" And my son, my own flesh and blood, simply nodded in agreement, without even bothering to look at me. They left their plates practically untouched, and I, as I always did, said nothing. I just quietly cleared the table and washed the dishes while they continued chatting about their grand plans, their dreams, their bright future. A future where I clearly didn't exist. But there was one particular moment, one pivotal event that changed absolutely everything. It happened on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in the bathroom when I heard Devin and Tasha arrive unexpectedly. They hadn't told me they were coming over. I could hear their voices carrying from the living room, and something in their tone, a certain intensity, made me freeze in place. Compelled me to listen. "How much do you think this place is actually worth?" Tasha asked, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I don't know, maybe around $280,000. Devin replied casually. "With that kind of money we could finally put a down payment on a real house, a big one with a yard and everything." Tasha's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "But your mom will never agree to sell, will she, Devin?" He let out a dry, chilling laugh. "Nah, but she's not exactly going to live forever, is she? And when she finally kicks the bucket, this place is all mine. It's the only inheritance I'm ever going to get." Tasha sighed, clearly relieved. "Thank goodness, because honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep up this ridiculous charade of pretending to actually like her." I felt something deep inside me shatter into a million irreparable pieces. I remained frozen in the bathroom, instinctively clamping my hand over my mouth to stifle any sound. The tears began to flow freely, but they weren't simply tears of sadness. It was something far deeper than that. It was the agonizing death of an illusion. The illusion that my son actually loved me, that I mattered to him even in the slightest way. When I finally composed myself enough to emerge from the bathroom, they were sitting comfortably on the sofa, completely oblivious to my presence. Tasha flashed me a practiced smile. "Mama Clara, what a surprise to see you. We didn't even realize you were home." A blatant lie. They knew perfectly well that I was there. They simply didn't care enough to even pretend otherwise. Devin didn't even bother to look up from his phone. He was too engrossed in whatever was happening on the screen. And I smiled back at them just as I always did. I politely offered them coffee, but they both declined. They stayed for another 10 minutes, making insincere small talk, before finally leaving. I sank down onto that old, despised sofa and asked myself, when did I become this pathetic creature waiting around for her own death, just to stop being such a burden? The hours crawled by after they left. I simply stared blankly at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of the city. The passing cars, the distant voices, the wind rattling against the window panes. And at some point during that long dark night, between the silence and the city noises, I made a life-altering decision. A decision that would irrevocably change the course of my life. I was no longer willing to simply wait around for my life to end. I refused to continue living as an invisible ghost. I was not going to passively hand over my remaining years to someone who was just impatiently waiting for me to die. For the first time in 7 long years, I felt the stirrings of something akin to rage, but it wasn't a wild, explosive rage. It was a cold, calculated anger. It was the righteous anger of someone who was finally waking up from a long and terrifying nightmare. The very next morning, I awoke feeling like a different person. It's difficult to adequately explain the sensation. It was as if something deep inside me had hardened overnight, as if all the countless tears I had shed had somehow washed away everything old and rotten, leaving behind a clean slate and making space for something entirely new, something far stronger. I got out of bed, made my usual pot of coffee, but this time I didn't simply sit and stare blankly out the window like I always did. Instead, I pulled out an old, worn notebook that I had stored away in a drawer and began to write. I meticulously wrote down every single thing I could remember. Every cutting insult, every hurtful word, every contemptuous look I had ever received from them. I needed to see it all laid out in stark black and white. I desperately needed to understand how utterly blind I had allowed myself to become. And when I finally finished, I had filled 5 entire pages with damning evidence. 5 pages of solid proof that I hadn't been imagining things, that I wasn't crazy, that they had genuinely and deliberately reduced me to nothing. The humiliations, of course, didn't magically stop. In fact, they actually seemed to intensify. It was almost as if Devin and Tasha somehow sensed that I was starting to change, and felt the urgent need to remind me of my place. 2 weeks after I overheard their damning conversation, they came to visit again. This time they arrived bearing news. "Mom," Devin announced without even bothering with a greeting, "we need to talk to you about something important. Tasha and I are seriously looking at houses. We really want to start a family, but everything is just so incredibly expensive these days." I simply nodded my head, said nothing, and waited for them to continue. Then Tasha jumped in, using that overly sweet, saccharine voice that I had grown to despise so much. "Mama Clara, we both know that this unit is far too big for just one person. 2 whole bedrooms for just you. It's really such a waste, don't you think? You could easily live somewhere much smaller and cozier, and maybe you could consider selling us this place at a fair price." Of course, they meant a family price. The words sounded kind enough on the surface, but I knew exactly what they were implying. They wanted me to simply give away my only valuable asset, to hand over the home that my husband and I had painstakingly paid for with 30 years of hard work and sacrifice, just so they could conveniently start their lives without having to make any sacrifices of their own. I took a deep breath to steady myself and calmly told them, "I'm just not ready to sell right now. This place holds far too many precious memories for me." Devin frowned, his face darkening with annoyance. "Mom, don't be so selfish. You're not going to need it for much longer anyway. At your age, what's even the point of clinging to material things? You really should be thinking about your son, about your family, and considering your condo filled us with hope. You know? Hope. What a weird word to use when you really mean greed." Tasha went on, "It's not just about the money, Mama Clara, honest. We love you, and we want you to be part of our lives. Come live with us, be a grandma to our kids. We need the space. That house, it would be everything. You could make it happen, Mama Clara. You could be our salvation." It all sounded so perfect, like she'd been rehearsing, but it felt hollow. If they really loved me, they just want to be with me, not ask me to give them everything. Finally I said, "Tasha, let me ask you something. If I didn't have this condo, if I had nothing, would you still come to see me?" She blinked at me, all surprised. "Of course, Mama Clara. What kind of question is that?" Then I asked her, "Why is it that all you've talked about for the last few months is this condo? Why don't you ever just call to see how I'm doing? Why does every conversation lead back to the same thing?" She just opened her mouth, but no words came out, because there was no answer. Or maybe the answer was too obvious, and she didn't want to say it out loud. She stood there for a few seconds, then got up and said, "Maybe I came at a bad time. We'll talk later." And just like that, she left me alone in that empty room. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Every word, every little trick, every lie just told me I was doing the right thing. That night, back in my new condo, I went over all the papers again. The deed, the sale receipts, even the recordings I'd made. Everything was exactly as it should be. I was ready. All I needed was that last moment, the big showdown. And I knew it was coming soon because Devin and Tasha weren't exactly known for their patience. Their desperation would be their downfall, I was sure of it. A mistake I was just waiting for them to make. I took a deep breath, sipped some tea, and got ready for what was coming. This was just the beginning of the war, and this time I was armed to the teeth. 2 weeks later it happened. I knew Devin would get impatient sooner or later and just show up, try to corner me into giving him an answer. And that's exactly what he did. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my new condo drinking coffee and watching the world go by outside. My phone rang and it was Devin. "Mom," he said, "I'm on my way over. We have to finish this today. You can't just keep avoiding us. I'll be there in half an hour." And he hung up before I could even say a word. I just stared at my phone. My heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear. It was pure adrenaline. I'd been waiting for this, preparing for it. And here it was. I got dressed real casual, comfortable slacks, a cream-colored blouse, nothing fancy. Pulled my hair back, slipped on my shoes, and headed over to the old place. I still had the keys. The new owner wasn't moving in until next week, so I was technically still allowed inside. I got there before Devin walked up the stairs, unlocked the door, and waited. The condo was almost completely empty. Just a few boxes left in the corners. My footsteps echoed through the bare rooms. I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall, and waited. 5 minutes later, I heard someone running down the hall. The door burst open, and Devin stormed in like a tornado, with Tasha right behind him. "Mom," he started to say, but he stopped dead when he saw the empty apartment. His face went from confused to worried in about a second. "What the hell is going on here? Where's the furniture? Where's everything?" Slowly I stood up. "I sold it," I said, nice and calm. "You sold the furniture?" Tasha asked, her voice all high-pitched. "Not just the furniture," I told her. "I sold the condo too." The silence after that was like you could cut it with a knife. Devin just stared at me like he couldn't understand what I was saying. Tasha looked like she was about to faint. "What did you say?" Devin mumbled. "I sold the condo," I repeated, a little louder this time. 3 weeks ago. Papers are signed, everything's done. The new owner moves in next week." Devin just exploded. "How could you sell the condo? I promised it to my wife. Give me the money from the sale right now." He was yelling, his hands shaking. Tasha started crying. "Mom, how could you do this to us? We were counting on this place. We had plans, dreams, and you just destroyed them." I stood there, not moving an inch, looking right at them. "This condo was mine. It wasn't yours. It was never yours. And I could do whatever I wanted with it." Devin took a step towards me, his face red with anger. "Don't you dare say that. I'm your son, your only family. That condo was my inheritance. It was the only thing you were going to leave me. Your inheritance," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Devin, you're 38 years old. You have a job, you're healthy, you have your whole life ahead of you. And you were already planning what to do with my things when I died? That's not being a son, that's being a vulture." Tasha just shrieked, all offended. "How dare you talk to him like that? He gave you everything. He took care of you after your husband died." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Took care of me? Tasha, your husband visited maybe once a month. Called only when he needed something. You two have spent the last few years acting like I'm a nuisance, something you just have to put up with until I finally kick the bucket." "But Mom," Devin started, his voice all soft and desperate now. "Tasha and I have nowhere to go. We can't just live on the street. We need that money. It's yours by right." "By right?" I asked, hardly believing what I was hearing. "What right? The right to be my son, the right to have been born? That doesn't give you the right to my life, or to decide what I do with my own things." Devin ran his hands through his hair. He was losing it, his perfect little plan falling apart. "Then at least give us the money from the sale. You already sold it, you have the cash. Give it to us, we can still buy a house, please." That was the first time I'd heard him say please in years. But it didn't sound real. It was just the sound of someone who knew they were losing. Tasha came closer to me. "Mama Clara, please think about us. Think about the grandkids you could have. If we don't have a house, how are we going to start a family? How are we going to give you the grandkids you want so much?" "The grandkids I want so much," I repeated softly. "Tasha, you never wanted to give me grandchildren. You just wanted to use the idea of grandkids to get to me, to make me feel guilty, to force me to give you everything." She backed away like I'd slapped her. "That's not true. We do want a family." "Then what happened to the money?" Devin interrupted. "Where is it?" "In my account," I answered. "I used some of it to buy a new condo, smaller, cozier for me. The rest is for my old age, for my peace of mind, for me." Devin just looked at me with pure hatred. "You're selfish. A selfish old woman who only thinks about herself." "And what did you want me to do?" I shouted back. Give you everything and be left with nothing? Live on scraps, hoping you'd be nice enough to visit me once a year? Tasha was sobbing like she was in a movie. But we wanted you to live with us. We were going to take care of you. That's a lie, I said, cutting her off. You didn't want to take care of me. You wanted my money, and once you had it, you would have stuck me in the cheapest assisted living place you could find. Devin shook his head. You're paranoid. You're making stuff up. I'm not making anything up, I told him. And then I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I have proof. Proof of what? Tasha asked, her voice shaking now. Of everything. Of every conversation where you talked about me like I was already dead. Of every plan you made behind my back. Of every mean thing you said, thinking I couldn't hear you. The color drained from Devin's face. You recorded us? I recorded you, I said, making sure he understood. Because I needed to know I wasn't imagining things. I needed to know for sure that all you saw me as was a way to get what you wanted. Devin took a step toward me, his fists all clenched. Give me that phone right now. No, I said, stepping back. These recordings are my insurance just in case you decide to do something stupid. Like what? Tasha asked. Like trying to sue me? Like trying to take what's mine? Like trying to say I'm losing it or can't make my own decisions. I've heard enough stories to know how this works. Devin let out a laugh, but it wasn't funny. You're crazy. Completely crazy. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I finally came to my senses after years of letting you walk all over me. There was a moment where nobody said anything. The three of us just stared at each other. You could feel the anger, the hurt, and all the things we'd been hiding from each other hanging in the air. Then Tasha spoke, her voice all cold. We'll never forgive you for this. Never. I can live with that, I said. Devin pointed towards the door. Come on, Tasha. There's nothing left for us here. She followed him, but before she left, she turned back to me. I hope that money makes you happy, Mama Clara, because it's going to cost you your only family. It cost me my family a long time ago, Devin, I said. I just didn't realize it until now. They left, slamming the door behind them. The sound echoed through the empty condo. I stood there alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt like I'd won. I felt free. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself. I had said no, and I was still standing. I sat down on the floor again. My legs were shaking from all the excitement. My heart was still pounding. But there was something else too. Something warm in my chest. It was relief. It was peace. It was like I'd taken my life back. I stayed in that empty condo for almost an hour, just sitting on the floor, looking at the bare walls, thinking about everything that had just happened. I didn't feel bad about it, not even for a second. But there was something in the air, like this was the end of something. This place had been my home for 30 years. I'd cooked thousands of meals here. I'd mourned my husband's death here. I'd gotten old here, all by myself. And now, right here, I had taken my freedom back. I stood up slowly, walked through every empty room, touching the walls with my fingers. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for everything. And then I left, closing the door behind me for the last time. When I got back to my new condo, it was like a whole different world. The windows were letting in tons of sunlight. The place was small, but it felt good, like a fresh start. Everything smelled new, like anything was possible. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window and smiled, really smiled for the first time in forever. Not just being polite, not trying to be nice, but a real honest smile. I had done something for me. I had put my own happiness first instead of letting other people push me around, and that felt pretty amazing. Then the phone rang, breaking the peace and quiet. It was a number I didn't know. I didn't really want to answer it, but I did anyway. Hello, I said. It was a woman's voice on the other end, someone I didn't know. Mrs. Johnson, this is Simone, Tasha's sister. I need to talk to you. My stomach just dropped. Simone. Tasha had told her sister everything. And now they were sending in the backup, trying to make me feel guilty through someone else. Go ahead, I said, trying to sound normal. Mrs. Johnson, Tasha told me what happened, and I have to say I'm really disappointed in you. How could you do that to your own son? He needed you and you turned your back on him. I took a deep breath. Simone, with all due respect, you don't know the whole story. You only know what your sister told you, the version where I'm the bad guy. She just scoffed at that. What else could there be? You sold the condo your son needed. That's all I need to know. My son didn't need that condo, I said firmly. My son wanted that condo. There's a big difference. Simone kept going, her voice hard and mean. Tasha is heartbroken. Devin is heartbroken. You ruined their dreams, their plans for the future. And why? So you could buy a smaller place and save money you won't even live long enough to spend? That's just selfish. I didn't interrupt her. I let her say everything she needed to say. And when she finally stopped waiting for me to say something, I spoke, and I was surprised at how calm I sounded. Simone, I get that you want to stick up for your sister. That's normal. But let me ask you something. When was the last time Devin and Tasha came to see me without asking for something? When was the last time they called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time they treated me like a person, and not like a bank? There was a silence on the other end, like she didn't know what to say. They have their own lives, Simone finally said, but she didn't sound so sure of herself. Their jobs, their responsibilities. Exactly, I said. They have their lives and I have mine. And my life doesn't have to be all about giving up everything for them to be comfortable. Simone tried to argue some more. But Mrs. Johnson, you're his mother. Parents should always help their kids. They should always be there. I was there for 38 years, I said, raising my voice a little. I gave my son everything I could. But there comes a point where kids have to stand on their own 2 feet. And if Devin is still expecting me to fix his life at 38, then I didn't do a good job as a mother. But I'm not going to keep making the same mistake by letting him use me. Simone hung up without saying goodbye. I just looked at the phone. I knew this wasn't the end, that Tasha and Devin would try to use other people to get to me, to make me feel guilty, to wear me down. But I had made up my mind and nothing they did was going to change it. That night before I went to bed, I checked my bank account online. The money was there, over $100,000. More money than I'd ever had, all in one place, and it was all mine. Nobody could take it. Nobody could tell me what to do with it. It was my safety net. My freedom right there on the screen. I slept really well that night. No bad dreams, no worries, just peace. The next few days were surprisingly normal. I spent my time getting settled in my new place. I bought some plants for the windows. I put up some light beige curtains. I put my books on the little shelf. Everything I did made me feel like this was my place, that nobody was going to come in and tell me what to do, or what to change. It was my safe place, my little kingdom. A week later I got a text message from Devin. It was long, like he'd really thought about what he wanted to say. Mom, it started. I've had some time to think and I think we both said some things we didn't mean. I know I haven't been a good son to you. I know I haven't been around as much as I should. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. You're my mother, and you always will be. I wish we could talk and try to work this out. I read the message a few times, looking for something real in there, but I didn't find it. He never said, I'm sorry, not really. He didn't say that he understood what he'd done wrong. It was just a general apology, like he was trying to see if he could still get something out of me. I didn't answer it. I just put my phone away and went on with my day. 2 days later I got another message. This one was from Tasha. Mama Clara, please don't shut us out. I know we messed up, but everyone deserves a second chance. Devin is really hurting. He's not eating, he's not sleeping. He really wants to make things right with you. Please just give him a chance. I didn't answer that one either. I knew it was just an act trying to make me feel sorry for them, to soften me up. One afternoon I was sitting in a park near my new condo, enjoying the sun, and I saw an older woman sitting on a bench. She was all alone, feeding breadcrumbs to the pigeons. I walked over and sat down next to her. It's a beautiful day, I said. She smiled. It is, she said. I come here every day. It's my time to relax. I asked her if she had family. She nodded. 3 kids, 8 grandkids, but I don't see them much. They're busy with their own lives and I understand. I don't want to be a burden. Her words reminded me of myself, just a few months ago. You're not a burden, I told her. You're a person, and you deserve to be treated like one. She looked surprised and then she smiled with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. I needed to hear that. We talked for almost an hour. She told me about her life, what she'd been through, what had disappointed her, and I told her my story about Devin, Tasha, the condo, and what I decided to do. She listened without judging me. When I was finished, she took my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I wish I was as brave as you, but I'm scared of being all alone. Being alone isn't the worst thing that can happen, I said. The worst thing is being around people who make you feel lonely. She nodded slowly, like she finally understood something. We said goodbye with a hug, and as I walked home I felt different. I felt connected to something, like I had a purpose. I'd been so focused on what was wrong with Devin that I'd forgotten there were other people out there, other stories, other people who were lonely too. That night I made a decision. I was going to find some groups for older people, classes, whatever. I needed to make a new life for myself, one that wasn't just about my son. I went online and started looking. I found a painting class that met on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon. I'd never painted before, but something about the description caught my eye. Express yourself without feeling judged. Be creative without pressure. Be with others without having to commit to anything. I signed up before I could talk myself out of it. The first class was in 3 days. And even though I felt nervous, I was also excited, something I hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of starting something new, of finding a part of myself I'd never known was there. Meanwhile, the messages from Devin and Tasha kept coming. Getting more desperate, more manipulative. Mom, please. You can't just ignore us forever. We're your family. Mama Clara, Devin is thinking about going to therapy. He really wants to change. He just needs you to be there for him. Mom, please just answer us so we know you're okay. We're worried about you. Every message was just another way of trying to get back inside. But I wasn't the same woman anymore, the one who would believe their sweet words. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had finally learned that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who knows what they want. And those boundaries aren't walls. They're just doors you get to choose when to open and when to keep closed. On Sunday I got one last call. This time it was a number I knew. It was Brenda, a cousin I hadn't seen in years. Clara May, she said like she meant business. Devin called me. He told me what happened and I wanted to tell you that I understand where you're coming from, but I also wanted to ask you to think about forgiving him. Family is the most important thing and holding a grudge is only going to hurt you. I listened to what she had to say, took a deep breath and told her, Brenda, it's not a grudge. It's a choice. A choice not to let them hurt me anymore. And if family is so important, why didn't Devin act like it when he had the chance? Why does he only remember we're family when he needs something? She didn't know what to say, so I just went on. I appreciate you calling, Brenda, but I've already made my decision. And then I hung up. Tuesday came quicker than I thought it would. It was the day of my first painting class. I got up early, ate a nice breakfast and put on some comfortable clothes, gray slacks, a soft white blouse. Nothing special, but I felt good. When I got to the place where the class was, it was a small room filled with sunlight. There were 6 other people there, all women, all over 50. The teacher's name was Ms. Eleanor Vance. She had white hair and a messy bun, and a smile that made you feel welcome right away. Good morning, she said softly. Today, we're not going to worry about being perfect. We're just going to let our hands show how we feel. And that's how my new life started. First, I felt awkward. The brush shook in my hand, the colors didn't look right on the canvas. But Ms. Vance walked around saying nice things. There are no mistakes in art, just discoveries, she told us. After an hour, I started to relax. I stopped thinking so much. I stopped trying to make everything perfect and I just painted. I didn't know what I was making. It was all abstract, kind of messy, but it was mine. And when the class was over, I felt lighter. like I'd let something out that I'd been holding in for years. The other women showed off what they'd done too. Each one had a story to tell. Each one had their own problems and nobody judged anyone else. It was a safe place, a place where I could just be Clara May, not just someone's mother, not just someone's widow, just me. After the class, one of the women came over to me. Her name was Ruth Baker. She had short curly hair and a laugh that made you want to smile. "It's your first time, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It shows," she said. "But in a good way. You clearly have a lot you want to say." We laughed, and she asked me if I wanted to get some coffee. We went to a cafe nearby, and as we drank our coffee, Ruth told me her story. She had been married for 40 years. Her husband had died 3 years ago, and her kids lived in other cities. They came to visit maybe once a year if she was lucky. "I was so sad at first," she told me. "I felt like my life was over. But one day I came to the realization that if nobody else was going to step up and live my life for me, I had to take the reins myself. And here I am now, painting, dancing, truly living." Her words really struck a chord with me. It was exactly what I was in the process of doing, reclaiming my own life. Ruth became the first genuine friend I'd had in years. We started making plans to get together after every class. Sometimes we'd grab coffee, sometimes we'd take a walk in the park, and we always talked about absolutely everything and absolutely nothing, with no filters and no judgment. It felt so liberating to have someone who truly understood what it meant to reinvent yourself at this stage of life. 2 weeks went by. 2 weeks of peace, of settling into new routines, of days filled with small, simple joys. But, of course, that peace couldn't possibly last forever. One Friday afternoon, I heard a knock at my condo door. I wasn't expecting any visitors. I peeked through the peephole and my heart skipped a beat. It was Tasha. I opened the door just a tiny crack. "What are you doing here?" I asked, making no move to invite her inside. Tasha looked different, thinner, and more tired than I remembered. She had dark, noticeable circles under her eyes. "Mama Clara, please," she pleaded. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes, that's all I ask." I hesitated, unsure. Part of me wanted to slam the door right in her face, but another part of me felt this strange curiosity. What could she possibly want now? I wondered. I opened the door all the way, but I made sure not to let her step inside. "Speak," I said, crossing my arms defensively. Tasha took a deep breath and began. "I came to apologize. And honestly, Devin doesn't even know I'm here. He's furious. He says he'll never forgive you, but I can't live like this. I just can't live with all this tension, with all this resentment. I need you to know that I'm truly sorry, and that I understand why you did what you did." Her words sounded a little rehearsed, almost like a prepared speech. "You're sorry?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or are you sorry you lost access to the money?" Tasha lowered her gaze, avoiding my eyes. "I know you probably think we only cared about the money, and maybe in the beginning we did. But we're not bad people, Mama Clara. We were just desperate, scared about the future, and we saw your condo as the solution to all of our problems. But that still didn't give us the right to treat you the way we did." At least she recognized that much. That was more than Devin had ever done. "I appreciate your apology, Tasha," I said, "but it really doesn't change anything." She looked up quickly, hopefully. "But could we start over? Could we build a real relationship? No self-interest, no pressure, just as a family?" I sighed deeply. "I wish I could believe you, but regaining trust takes a lot of time, and honestly, I don't know if I have that kind of time or energy anymore." Tasha nodded slowly, understanding. Tears started to stream down her cheeks. "I understand," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone is like Devin, that I truly regret everything, and that if you ever decide to give us another chance, I'll be here." She turned to leave, but before she started down the stairs, I called out to her. "Tasha," I said. She stopped and turned back. "If you really want to show me that you've changed, don't do it with words. Do it with actions and not toward me. Do it for yourself. Build your own life without depending on inheritances, without just waiting for others to solve all your problems." That's the only way I could ever consider you someone who's truly different. She nodded again and left. I don't know if she would really change or not. Probably not, I thought, but at least she had attempted something that Devin never did. Acknowledging her mistakes. That night, I sat down and reflected on everything that had happened over the last month. I had sold my condo. I had confronted my own son. I had finally set some boundaries. I had started painting again. I had even made a new friend. I had finally regained my dignity. And even though there were still moments of doubt, moments of sadness, moments of wondering if I had done the right thing, deep down I knew the answer. I had done exactly what I needed to do. I had saved myself because it was clear that nobody else was going to. The following days continued their quiet, peaceful rhythm. The painting classes became my favorite part of the week. Miss Vance taught us how to use different techniques: watercolor, oil, acrylic, and each time, I felt freer, more like myself. One afternoon while I was painting, Miss Vance approached my table. "Clara May," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied. "Have you noticed how your painting has changed since you started?" I looked at her confused. "How so?" "At first, you painted with small, fearful, very controlled strokes, but now your strokes are broad, confident, and free. That speaks of an internal change, a liberation." I felt a lump forming in my throat, because she was absolutely right. I had changed. And that change was reflected even in things that I hadn't consciously noticed. "I went through something difficult recently," I told her. "I had to make some decisions that hurt, but that were absolutely necessary." Miss Vance smiled knowingly. "The best decisions always hurt at first, but then they give you wings." Those words really stayed with me. Gave me wings. Yes, that was exactly how I felt. As if, after years of being tied down, I could finally fly. Ruth and I started planning a short trip, just a weekend, to a nearby coastal town to visit the museums, to wander around aimlessly, to simply enjoy life without having to ask anyone's permission. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to me. It meant that I could still make plans, that my life wasn't over, that there were still adventures left to live. When I told Ruth about my situation with Devin, she didn't judge me at all. She just gave me a warm hug and said, "Children don't really understand that parents also have the right to live their own lives. They just think we were born to serve them. But you taught them something really important. You taught them about boundaries." 3 months had passed since that difficult confrontation. 3 months of tranquility, of new routines, of painting, of friendship with Ruth, of spending peaceful afternoons in the park, of enjoying quiet evenings reading on my small but comfortable sofa. My life had finally found a rhythm that made me happy. It wasn't some kind of explosive, over-the-top happiness. It was a calm, deep, genuine happiness. But, as so often happens, just when you get completely used to the peace, the past comes knocking at your door again. It was a Saturday morning. I was brewing coffee when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any visitors. I looked through the peephole and my heart paused for a second. It was Devin alone without his wife. He looked different, thinner, with an unshaved beard, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. I hesitated before opening the door, but something in his posture made me do it. I opened the door, but stayed standing in the frame, blocking the entrance. "What do you want, Devin?" I asked. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I just want to talk. No screaming, no demands. Just talk, please." There was something in his voice that sounded different, more broken, more real. I let him come inside. We sat down in the small living room. He looked around with a strange expression on his face. "This is your new place?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "It's fine. Small, but it's enough for me." He nodded in silence. There was a long moment of uncomfortable quiet, and then he finally spoke. "Mom, I came to tell you that you were right about everything." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. Devin never admitted that he was wrong about anything. "Go on," I said, urging him to continue. He ran his hands over his face, looking distressed. "The last 3 months have been the worst of my entire life. Tasha and I almost split up. We lost the house we wanted. I had trouble at work because I was so distracted, and all because I couldn't accept that I had lost something that was never really mine to begin with. I stayed silent, letting him continue to speak. I went to therapy, he continued. The therapist helped me to see things that I didn't want to accept. He made me see that I had treated you like a resource, like something that I could just use whenever I needed it. I never saw you as a person with your own needs, with a right to your own life, and that's unforgivable. I felt something stir inside my chest. It wasn't relief. Not yet, at least, but it was definitely something. I'm glad that you're going to therapy, I said carefully. That's a good first step. Devin looked up at me. There were tears welling up in his eyes. I didn't come here to ask you for the money back. I didn't come to ask you to change your will. I just came to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. And I'll understand if you can never forgive me. His words actually sounded sincere. For the first time in years, they sounded completely genuine. But I had learned to be cautious. I appreciate your apology, Devin, I said. But apologies don't erase years of mistreatment. They don't erase all the pain that you caused me. He nodded slowly. I know, he said. And I don't expect them to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did, and that I'm really trying to be a better person. Not for you, not even for Tasha, but for myself, because I just don't like the person that I had become. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, and then I asked him something that I had wanted to know for a very long time. Devin, why did you never visit me? Why did spending time with me always seem like such an obligation? He took a deep breath. Because you reminded me of Dad. And his death hurt me so much that I preferred to distance myself from everything that reminded me of him. Including you. I know that it sounds awful. I know that it's selfish, but it's the truth. His words hit me hard because I finally had an answer. It wasn't a good answer, but at least it was honest. I miss your father too, I said softly. Every single day. But pulling away from me didn't make the pain any less. It only made me feel more alone. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I wish that I could go back in time, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. To do things differently. But I can't. All I can do is try to be better from now on. If you ever decide to give me another chance, I promise that it'll be different. But if you don't, I'll understand that too. He stood up to leave. Before opening the door, he turned back to face me. Can I call you sometimes just to see how you're doing? Without asking for anything? He paused, thinking for a moment. Without asking for anything, he repeated. You can, I said. But if you ever try to manipulate me again, if you ever treat me the way that you did before, there won't be any more chances. He nodded in understanding and then he left. When I closed the door, I stood there for a long time just processing everything. Really feeling it all. I honestly didn't know if Devin would really change, if this time was actually different. But at least he had taken that crucial first step. He had acknowledged his mistakes, and that was more than Tasha had ever done. More than anyone had ever done. That afternoon I went to my painting class. Miss Vance noticed something different about me right away. Did something happen? She asked. Yes, I replied. My son came over to apologize. And I honestly don't know how I feel about it. She smiled with understanding. You don't have to know how to feel right now. Feelings are complex. They can coexist. You can be hurt and hopeful at the same time. I painted that day with a different kind of intensity. I used dark colors mixed with bright ones, representing exactly what I felt. The darkness of the past mixed with the light of a possible future. When I finished, Ruth came over to take a look at my work. It's beautiful, she said. And sad and hopeful all at the same time. Exactly, I replied. That's exactly how I feel. That night, alone in my condo, I thought a lot about forgiveness, about whether it was weak to forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply, or whether it was actually strong. And I came to a conclusion. Forgiveness wasn't for Devin. Forgiveness was really for me, so that I could release all the weight that I had been carrying around, so that I could finally move forward without all that resentment poisoning my soul. But forgiving him didn't mean forgetting what had happened. It didn't mean allowing him to hurt me again. It just meant letting go of the past and keeping on walking forward. The following days felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Devin even called me twice that week. They were short, simple conversations, just asking how I was, briefly telling me about his day, not asking for anything, not trying to manipulate me in any way. And though I still kept my guard up, I began to feel that maybe, just maybe, there was a flicker of hope. Ruth and I finally took our trip. We went to a charming coastal city. We walked along the beach, visited some wonderful art galleries, ate delicious seafood in small restaurants, and I laughed. I laughed truly, with my whole body, with my whole soul. I laughed in a way that I hadn't laughed in years. And in one of those moments, while we were walking along the shore with our feet in the cold water, Ruth said something to me that I'll never forget. "Clara May," she said, taking my hand, "I'm so incredibly proud of you. Of how you stood up for yourself, of how you reclaimed your own life. You are so much braver than you even realize." Her words filled me with an emotion that was hard to describe, because for so long I had just felt weak, and cowardly, and almost invisible. But now someone else saw me as brave. And maybe she was right. Maybe I had actually been brave all this time without even realizing it. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, I realized. It's acting in spite of it. And I had done exactly that. 6 months had passed since that day of the confrontation. Half a year of learning to live again. Of rediscovering who I really was without all the chains of guilt. Without the crushing weight of other people's expectations. It was a peaceful Sunday morning. The warm sunlight streamed through my window, illuminating all of the plants that now filled every corner of my small condo. I got up without rushing, made my coffee, and sat by the window, just as I did every morning. But this time there was something different in the air. A feeling of completeness, of genuine closure. My phone vibrated, breaking the silence. It was a text message from Ruth. "Ready for the exhibition today?" she asked. I smiled. Today was a special day for me. Miss Vance had organized a small exhibition of her students' work, and I had decided to participate. I got dressed carefully, putting on an olive green dress that I had bought the week before. I combed my hair, applied some light makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was very different from the woman I had seen 6 months ago. There was something new in her eyes. Strength, peace, and a dignity that had been rightfully regained. I arrived at the art hall about an hour early. My 3 paintings were already hanging on the wall. The first one was dark, full of grays and blacks. It represented my life from before. The second one was chaotic, with bright colors mixed with deep shadows. It represented the conflict, the awakening. And the third one was luminous, filled with vibrant yellows and oranges. It represented my present life, my newfound freedom. Miss Vance approached me with a huge, welcoming smile. "Clara May," she said, "your work tells such a complete story. It's absolutely beautiful to see your evolution." People started arriving, other students, family members, friends. Ruth arrived with a lovely bouquet of wildflowers for me. "I'm so incredibly proud of you," she said, hugging me tightly. We walked among the various works, each one telling a different story. Each woman had captured her own battles on those canvases, and there was something incredibly powerful in that. In seeing how pain could transform into beauty, in seeing how creativity could heal. I was explaining the meaning of my second painting to a woman, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mom." I turned around slowly. Devin was standing in the doorway alone, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. He looked nervous and unsure, as if he didn't even know if he was welcome there. I approached him with measured steps. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not with hostility, but with cautiousness. "You told me about this exhibition," he replied, "and I really wanted to come. I wanted to see what you've been doing, if you'll let me." I looked him directly in the eyes, searching for some kind of hidden agenda, but all I saw was genuine curiosity. "It's okay," I said. "You can stay." His face immediately lit up with relief. We walked together over to my paintings. He observed them in silence for a long time, and then spoke softly. This first one is how you felt before, right? I nodded. And this third one is how you feel now? I nodded again. He pointed to the middle one, the chaotic painting. And this one? This is me. I'm the chaos that interrupted your darkness, but also the one who pushed you toward the light. His words surprised me with their unexpected depth. I honestly hadn't thought of it that way, I admitted. But you're right. Devin turned to face me directly. Mom, he said. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. I've really been working on myself and I've realized something. You didn't take anything away from me. You actually gave me something that I never had before. You gave me an example of what it really means to defend yourself, of what it means to live with dignity. And even though it hurt at the time, I understand it now. I felt a lump forming in my throat. I don't really know what to say, I stammered. You don't have to say anything, he replied. I just wanted you to know that, and I wanted to give you these. He handed me the flowers. They're not much, but I chose them myself. No help from Tasha, no consulting anyone. I was just thinking about you. I took the flowers with trembling hands. They were simple but truly beautiful. Thank you, I whispered. Devin stayed at the exhibition for a full 2 hours. He talked to Ruth, to Miss Vance, and to some of the other students. And for the very first time, I saw him genuinely interested in my life, in what I had actually built for myself. Before he left, he gave me a hug. It was a different kind of hug. It wasn't the mechanical hug from before. It was a real heartfelt embrace. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. And I'm really sorry that it took me so long to finally tell you that. When he left, Ruth approached me. That's your son? She asked. I nodded. He's changed, I said. Or at least he's really trying to. She smiled knowingly. Sometimes people need to lose something important in order to truly appreciate it. Maybe your bravery taught him a very important lesson. Maybe, I replied. Only time will really tell. But it's no longer my responsibility to fix him. That's his own battle now, and I definitely have my own. My battle is to keep growing, to keep on truly living. A week later, I received a letter. It was from Tasha. I opened it with curiosity. Mama Clara, it began. I don't really expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to reply to this letter. I just want you to know that Devin and I have separated. Not because of you, but because we both finally realized that we had built our relationship on the wrong foundation, on expectations, on dependency. Now we are both working on ourselves, and maybe someday, if fate allows, we can both become better people. Thank you for teaching me that saying no is also an act of love. Self-love. I folded the letter slowly, thoughtfully. I didn't feel any joy over their separation, but I didn't feel any sadness either. I just felt a sense of neutrality. I felt that everyone was finally finding their own path, and that was okay. The following months continued their quiet, peaceful rhythm. Devin called me once a week. We had simple conversations with no demands, no manipulation, just genuine questions about my life. And I actually shared things with him. I told him about my paintings, about Ruth, about the books that I was reading. And he listened. He truly listened. I honestly don't know if our relationship will ever be what it was before, but honestly, I really don't want it to be what it was before. I want something new, something healthier, something built on mutual respect, and not just on obligation. 1 year after the initial confrontation, I was sitting in the same park where I had met the woman feeding the pigeons. And I saw her again, sitting on the very same bench. I walked over to her with a smile. Do you remember me? I asked. She looked up, and her eyes lit up with recognition. The brave woman. Of course I remember you. We sat down together on the bench. I told her everything that had happened over the past year. She listened intently, and when I finished, she took my hand in hers. You did more than just save yourself, she said. You saved me too. After our conversation that day, I finally took your advice. I set some healthy boundaries with my own children. And guess what? Some of them got angry, but others actually understood. And now I have a much more honest and genuine relationship with all of them. Thank you. Her words filled me with a deep sense of emotion, because I had made a positive difference, not just in my own life, but in someone else's life as well. That night, before falling asleep, I wrote in a diary that I had recently started keeping. Today marks 1 year since I made the hardest decision of my entire life. I wrote, 1 year since I chose my own dignity over the approval of others. And I can honestly say without any hesitation that I absolutely do not regret it. I have finally learned that love is not constant sacrifice, that family is not blind obligation, that forgiveness is not forgetting, and that old age is definitely not the end. It's just another chapter. A chapter where I can finally be who I always should have been. I belong to no one now. I am simply me, and that is more than enough. It is everything. I closed the diary, turned off the light, and drifted off to sleep with a contented smile on my face. The smile of a truly free woman.